We had Congressman Colin Peterson up, but I don't think he's made it, so we're going to keep going. And I'd like to introduce Kevin Wheeler, who is our Deputy Chief of Staff for NOAA. Kevin is Deputy Chief of Staff for the Undersecretary. He's developed a lot of policy positions on behalf of the NOAA administration. He spent more than 20 years working in environmental science and policy positions in Washington. He was also served as the Executive Director for the Seafood Harvesters of America, the Vice President of the Consortium of Ocean Leadership, and the Director of Federal Relations for Brown University. Kevin's also worked on the Science Committee for the U.S. House of Representatives and as the Special Assistant to the Director of National Institute for Environmental Health and Sciences. He's worked diligently in Capitol Hill as Press Secretary and Legislative Assistant to Congressman Sherwood B. Holt. Did I say that right?
Nope.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay. He has an advanced degree for environmental management and public administration from Duke and Binghamton University. I'd like to welcome Mr. Kevin Wheeler.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here today. It's obviously a big day for aquaculture here on Capitol Hill. I think most of us are across the street watching the Senate Commerce Committee hearing on the same subject. And I'll let you know it's not just here on Capitol Hill that the federal government's engaging on aquaculture, certainly. And it's not just the Department of Commerce or NOAA, but been engaged with White House offices, everything from OSTP to OMB to CPQ to National Policy Committee to the National Economic Committee. Everyone's been very engaged on trying to figure out the best way forward to help grow this industry. But despite its potential, the development of aquaculture in the U.S. has been inhibited by many scientific, economic, legal, and production factors, such as inadequate credit, diffuse legal jurisdictions, and lack of management information, and a lack of supportive government policies. That's a quote from the 1980 Aquaculture Act, which I read last night after I put my kids to bed. Compelling reading, I recommend it to everybody. It's actually only 10 pages long, which is nice. So the good news is it's short. The bad news is we're far from, I think, achieving the goals of that act from 40 years ago. I mean, something else within that act I thought was interesting was it said, and I quote, although aquaculture currently contributes approximately 13% of world seafood production, less than 6% of current U.S. seafood production results from aquaculture. Now those numbers are obviously shifted dramatically in the last 40 years. So we're approaching, I think, about 50% of global seafood production is from aquaculture, but in the U.S., it's still a very small percentage, I think it's maybe 10%. And obviously most of that, if not all of it, quite frankly, is in state waters or state lands. So, what else has happened since 1980? Well, the global population has dramatically increased from 4.5 to 7.7 billion people. And it's continuing to grow, obviously, so there's a demand for protein. And so while aquaculture is proliferated overseas, we now have the benefits of learning the lessons. 40 years, 4 decades of R&D and technology and advances in genetics and broodstock development. So we can do it far more sustainably in an environmentally friendly way than we did 40 years ago. Also, since the last 40 years, in the 1980s, the United States basically established our exclusive economic zone throughout our foreign fishing fleets and established a domestic commercial fishing industry. And we now lead the world in the gold standard in sustainable wild capture fisheries. We've rebuilt upwards of 50 fish stocks. We've fundamentally pretty much ended overfishing commercially in our country. And yet, we haven't set the gold standard for aquaculture, at least in federal waters. So, it's a bit mind-boggling to consider the fact that the United States has arguably the largest EEZ in the world. We actually own more land that's submerged than it's above the water, and yet we rank something like 17th in the world in aquaculture production. So we're obviously missing something. So today, basically, our aquaculture policy in federal waters has been to export science, export technology, export broodstock, and re-import seafood. That's a terrible economic model and one that's led to our $16 billion trade deficit. So how do we turn this around? I think we need to do 4 things. First, we need to combat the false narrative that we're attempting to litter the ocean with industrial fish farms that will crash fish stocks and kill dolphins and pollute the environment. We will adhere to NEPA, Clean Water Act, Magnuson-Stevens Act, Dangerous Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act. These law statutory requirements aren't going away, nor should they. Secondly, we need to assist in the identification of ocean areas, sustainable and that could work for aquaculture in federal waters, that minimize conflicts with other ocean uses and meets our statutory obligations that I just mentioned. And we're doing this now in Hawaii, the Pacific Island region. They're doing a programmatic environmental impact assessment to find areas that are suitable for offshore aquaculture, identify what species would be good, as well as what gear types would work. Third, we need to establish a clear and predictable regulatory regime in federal waters with security of tenure that will attract investment. The clearest path of this is through new legislation, which they're discussing today across the Hill. But certainly we're also looking at executive actions to help facilitate this. And we need to bear in mind, currently there are no regulations in terms of what you can raise, where you can raise it, or how you can raise it in federal waters. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we need to elevate the global standards for aquaculture so we can have a level playing field for our domestic industry while also protecting ocean and coastal resources across the world. I mean, ultimately, our national food, environmental, and economic security requires a robust and profitable seafood industry, both wild capture as well as farms, whether it be on land, near shore, or offshore. And we need the American public to understand and have faith in the fact that U.S. seafood, all U.S. seafood, is sustainable, healthy, safe, and delicious. And they shouldn't have to have an app on their phone or a card in their wallet to know that U.S. seafood is the best in the world. Thank you.